Greetings from the kitchen, folks. Today I'm going to attempt to make a German Rauchbier, which I'd like to lager over winter in my garden shed. So there's my garden shed with two magpies on top of it, so that's good luck. Fingers crossed for the brew then. Here are my key ingredients. I've got 2 kilos of Weyerman Rauchmalt, 500 grams of light spray malt from Wilco's. I'm using a Crossmyloof Kolsch yeast, Brewers Gold hops. I don't know how much I'm going to put in yet, I'll have a think about that. I've also got some loose Fuggles leaves in my freezer. I'm going to add them as well just to use them up. I've got some brewing yeast nutrient and some Morrison's Yorkshire spring water. I'm going to begin by tipping my malt into the big pan. And I'm going to add to that 5 litres of spring water. And this should fill the pan right up. So here's a very stiff mixture of malt and water, chicken soup looking. I'm just lifting the malt from the bottom of the pan so it's not stuck there before I add the heat. I could do with a slightly larger pan if I'm quite honest, but I can make do with this one. So now I add my spoon on top like that so it doesn't boil over, although it shouldn't boil over. I'm putting the heat on extremely low. And I've got a lot of other things to do today, so I'm quite happy now to leave this for several hours to come up to temperature. I want it to get into the 60s. That's when the malts will release the most fermentable sugars. So I'll keep monitoring that, but it's going to take a while, and like I say, I've got things to do, so I'm in no rush. It's a nice and steady, patient job, this. My fermentation vessel of choice today is this Muntons wine fermenter. I'm hoping to get 10 litres from this, so double demijohn size basically. Okay, this has been going for 2 hours. I've been giving it an occasional stir, and I've just put the mesh on in case any flies are around. I'm going to have a look now at the temperature of this. I'm just going to put my thermometer in the centre of the brew, and it's 65, so it's brilliant. 66, so it's at the top end of where I want it to be. Sort of 60 to 66 is about right, I think, temperature-wise, for releasing the fermentable sugars. So I'm going to keep monitoring that now, and I want it to stay at this temperature for a little while. Okay, the temperature's now gone up into the 70s, so I've turned the heat off completely, and I'm just going to leave this now to sit for an hour. Hey folks, I'm back. It's been a busy day with lots to do, so I've just left the beer. I've not done anything with it, or the wort I should say. So here it is now. It's cooled down pretty much. It's not cold, but it's certainly not warm, and not that warm. It's you can touch your hand on it. It's not much more than body temperature. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extract and strain the grain, get the water out of it, and then I'm going to put some more water into the grain. So I'm going to press the grain over the pan itself so the water goes back into the pan, and then I'm going to put the grain into this wok. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'm going to dip the sieve into the pan, and now as you can see, lots of liquid coming back out. And I'm just going to press the grain to get as much of that liquid out as I can back into this pan. Ideally, I'd like to have used a straining bag for the grain, like just not had it loose in the pan, but I couldn't find one that was big enough. So any tips for a big straining bag, please fire it in my direction. One that can be boiled. Well, not boiled, but brought up to a temperature. Okay, and then we're going to put this in the wok. And I've got a lot more to go, so I'll come back to you when I've done this bit. Okay, I've got most of the grain out of the pan, not all of it, but I'm now going to attempt to pour what's in the pan through this sieve and a funnel into this demijohn. I'm just going to help it through a little bit with the spoon. Okay, and then that goes into the wok with the other grain, and then I carry on. Okay, now I need to get all my grain back into the big pan. So there's the liquid I've got so far. There's the grain back in the pan. So I'm just popping an airlock in here to keep out any contaminants. That's going to stay as it is for the time being. The grain is going to get some more water. So I'm hoping to empty as much of this 5 litre bottle as possible into it. I won't get it all in because the grain retains some water, but I've not done bad. I've probably got 4 out of 5 litres in there. And I'm going to stir this up, and there are lots of sugars in there. This is kind of like token gesture sparging. It's not really sparging because, you know, I don't do anything properly, I just do it my way. You know, which is fine. It works for me sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. But I just like to have a mess about. It's just a silly thing to do. And if I get a beer out of it, then I'm happy. And if I don't, I'm still happy. That's how it is. So, I'm going to leave this with this on for, say, an hour. Just going to let it stand, and then I'm going to put it back on the heat and let it warm up gently again into the 60s, and then I'm cutting the heat and I'm leaving it to cool completely overnight. Okay, the grain's been steeping for an hour. I'm putting the heat back on, and this is now going to mash like the other one did. I'm going to bring it up to the 60s, keep it at that temperature for a little while, turn the heat completely off, and then let it cool down overnight. I'm doing it twice because I've got twice as much grain in my pot, so I'm running water through it twice and doing the mash twice. I've just taken the temperature of this at 71, so I'm now going to remove the heat and I'm going to leave this to cool down. So I'll pick this up in the morning. Catch you then, folks. Morning from the kitchen, folks. Brew day 2, hopefully get it all finished today. Let's have a look what we've got. So this is the wort so far, which is in the demijohn. You can see that the sediment level is quite high, but this has not been boiled yet either, so I need to keep all this together and not separate anything out. And this is last night's second run of the mash, which is now just ready for straining. So it's exactly the same process as yesterday. Let the liquid filter out and then transfer the grain into this pan. I shall be back in a bit. And that's just about done. Okay, and in it goes into the demijohn again. Just taking my time. And I'm going to fill this demijohn up, but that's fine. Just stop there. I'm now going to put some into this water bottle. There's a bit of water left in the bottle, but that's fine because I was going to add some more water to the wort anyway. So I shall just tip some out of this demijohn into here. That's it. I shall proceed as before with the pan now and just continue to pour this into this water bottle. So my fermenting vessel will hold 10 litres, so that's basically 2 demijohns worth of liquid. So this is absolutely fine. Okay, I want to get this now back into there. It's a very splashy job. Yeah, kitchen's a nice mess. My wife's gonna kill me. So it's on the hob, gas on, heat on, and I'm gonna have this on a sort of a lowish heat. I don't want it to boil too rapidly. I obviously don't want it going everywhere. And I'm now going to leave this until it comes to the boil. Okay, it's getting close to a boil now. So 97, 3 degrees off boiling point. And there we go, the boil is now happening. Hopefully the spoon will stop this from boiling over, because it is obviously very full. I just need to keep an eye on it. Okay, so I've got my Brewer's Gold hot pellets, and I've got to tell you, they smell terrific actually. I want to put 30 grams of these in. Well, there's 32 grams, that will do just nicely. And that goes. This has been on the boil now incidentally for half an hour, and I'm going to leave it for another half an hour. You can see the hot pellets dissolve straight away. I've also got a few Fuggles hops which have been in the freezer. These were picked from my parents' garden, just growing wild through the fence. So I'm going to tip some of those in as well. Not measuring how much. And don't worry about the mess, they'll be strained before they go into the fermenter. Okay, this has been on the boil now for an hour. I'm now going to take the heat off, and because my fermenting vessel is a plastic one, I'm going to have to leave this now to cool, which is going to take quite a long time. So I'll be back in a bit. Okay, it's a few hours later. The beer wort is still warm, but it's no longer hot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into 2 separate fermenting vessels and see how it settles and see where the sediment line is before putting it into the final fermenter. So I've got a sieve to capture any of those hop leaves and any other large pieces of rubbish that might be in there. So far this is going nicely. Very milky now what's coming out, and the flow has slowed down. I shall carry on. Just a bit of patience required really. So in the end, after filtering, I've just got the 1 vessel full. So I've got 5 litres of horrible trubbiness, some gunk for the garden. We'll come back to this in a little bit. Here is how the wort has settled. There is quite a bit of sediment there, but it's not as bad as I thought, and considering that's like double concentrate, 2 kilos of grain, I'm actually okay with that, so I'm just going to leave it all in. So now it comes to the part of the recipe where I'm just going to make it up as I go along, because I hadn't planned for this eventuality. I was thinking I was going to end up with 10 litres of wort, not 5 litres of wort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 5 litres of water in the big pan, and then I'm going to add spray malt and brew sugar to that, and then I'm going to combine that with the beer wort in the fermenting vessel. If it works, great. If it doesn't, well, you know what? I just won't upload this film. So in goes 5 litres of spring water. So heat on. I don't want the water to boil, I just want it to warm up, and that will dissolve the brewing sugar and the spray malt before it gets to a boil. Fingers crossed. So firstly I'm going to stir the spray malt in. Stir it as I drop it in there, and the water has immediately changed colour to a yellowy colour. This seems to be going in and dissolving okay. And along with the spray malt, I'm now going to add 400 grams of brewing sugar. So this is a complete experiment. I'm probably going to end up making rocket fuel beer, which is fine. I actually like rocket fuel beer. In fact, an imperial Rauchbier doesn't sound too bad at all. Let's see what happens. Okay, I need to let the water warm up now and everything to dissolve satisfactorily in there. I'll be back in a bit. Okay, here is my Muntons fermenter. I now need to get all the liquid inside this. So using this jug, I'm just going to get the sugary spray malt water in as neatly as possible. I'm going to have to do some cleaning afterwards, that's for sure. Actually, smells very nice. Now I can risk giving it a tip. And that's all gone in lovely. I'm now going to add my Rauchbier wort into there. And that's probably as much as I want to put in, because I know this is going to build a fairly big krausen. And I don't want it to make a big mess in the integrated airlock. Yeah, I think I can sacrifice that bit. Okay, this is currently at 30 degrees. I don't know if you can see there, but the 30 is illuminated on the stick-on thermometer. It needs to be at 20 before I can take the original gravity. So I'm just going to leave this now until it's cooled down to 20 degrees. Okay, this is taking a while to cool down. It's still on 30. So I've ladled some out into here. There's 100 ml, just over. It won't go back in to the fermenting vessel. I'm going to pop this in the fridge for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, however long it takes, to get it down to 20. Then I'll take the original gravity. Okay, I've got the wort chilled down to 20 degrees. Let's have a look at the original gravity. Ooh, it's going to be a strong one, hopefully. And that is an original gravity of 1072, 1.072. Lovely stuff. Okay folks, I'm going to now add the yeast nutrient into this. I've only got a small amount left in this sachet, so I'm just going to tip the lot in. I'm probably looking at a teaspoon if that's just got in there. So this is Crossmyloof Kolsch yeast. So let's go by the teaspoon. So that's 1 heap teaspoon. That's 2 heap teaspoons. And that's all I would normally put in actually for that amount. So I won't put the rest in, because what I don't want is a yeasty tasting beer any more than it needs to be. So I've got my big spoon. I'm going to give it a big stir now. So the yeast will hopefully have a wonderful time in there, because this is warm. It's very sugary, there's lots of nutrient, there's all the goodness from the malts, from the grain, from the spray malt. I mean, it's every yeast dream really, isn't it? Let's hope. So I'm going to give this a good stir round, get it all mixing in, and I'm going to now take that out. I've got a filter just here, I'm going to put that in the top. I'm not putting the airlock in for a reason, because I have a feeling that the krausen might rise tonight and it might go slightly crazy. So I'm going to put that filter in. I'm going to put cling film over the top, tight, so it's sealed. So no air will get in, there'll be no oxygenation. And I'm just going to stab a couple of holes, 3 holes in the cling film, that's it. And that will be enough for it to be able to expel CO2. And if the krausen does rise and it goes a bit silly, then it'll be fine. It won't make a big mess. But what I don't want to do is mess the integrated airlock up on this, because it is more of a fiddle to clean out than a normal bubbler is. So we'll come back and have a look at this when fermentation begins. Okay, it's just an hour later. I'm off to bed, but I can see the formation, or the beginning of a formation of a krausen, so fingers crossed fermentation will be happening in earnest very soon. Okay, it's the next morning. Let's have a look. It certainly smells like a brewing beer. Krausen looks nice and healthy. You can see it keeps popping every now and again in different places. So all good. So it's time to get the airlock in place, and the Muntons wine fermenter comes with an integrated airlock, which basically just screws on. You can take it all apart. This all comes into separate bits and pieces, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to screw this into place. There you go, you can see that it's popping straight away. So I'm not out of the woods yet in terms of this going. I'm going to leave this on the sink for 2 days, and then hopefully after that first 48 hours, then that's past the crazy phase and I can just then leave it, put it elsewhere. But anyway, unless anything dramatic happens during fermentation, the next film that you see from me will either be clearing or bottling, depending on what I decide to do. Okay? Catch you then, folks. Just a 48-hour update. As you can see, the Krausen has gone. The Krausen came up to that height, it was frothing, you know, like mad, it was popping and bubbling, and the bubbler was going absolutely berserk. It's been a fast and furious one, this, but it's now pretty much settled down. I don't imagine that this is going to ferment for much longer than another week, probably, if that. Okay, just a quick update. So this has been in the fermenter for 10 days. It's completely stopped fermenting. Got a very small amount of sediment in the bottom, which is good. I didn't want a huge amount of sediment. And what's actually started to happen, you might not be able to tell on here at night time, because this is at night time with the lights on rather than in daylight, but it's beginning to clear a little bit at the top, as in it's getting more clarity and the cloudiness is sinking. And this is what happens after fermentation's finished. What I'm going to actually do is I'm going to put this outside overnight. I'm going to wrap it up a little bit with a towel, but put it outside overnight and try and cold crash it, as it's going to get down to 1 degree Celsius tonight. So there it is in the garden. And now there it is covered up with a couple of towels. Let's leave it overnight and see what it looks like in the morning. Well, it's the next morning and we've got frost on the shed roofs. Let's go and have a look at the beer. So here's the beer the next morning. It's definitely got darker and clearer. Not 100% clear, but I think at this point now I'm going to rack it into 2 demijohns. Okay, so here's my Rauchbier. And what I'm going to do now is get that out of there into a couple of demijohns. I'm going to use the tap on the Muntons wine fermenter today. I've never used that before, but I noticed that the tap is actually above the sediment line, so hopefully it won't claw too much sediment through with it. Let's wait and see. I'm going to begin by just taking out a very small sample, which is quite milky, I must say. So here goes. The sample I've taken out smells fantastic, by the way. Okay, that's the first one done. And that doesn't look too bad. I'm just going to have a quick sample of this because it really does smell wonderful. That is really good. Wow. High hopes. Let's hope it's going to turn out a good one. Right, demijohn number 2 to fill. Okay, so here it is in the 2 demijohns. I'm going to leave it for a few days and see if it begins to clear or not. If it isn't clearing quick enough, I'm going to add finings. So I'll see you in a few days' time for a progress update. Well, it's 5 days later. And I decided to do a little bit of cold crashing again with the help of Mother Nature. There it is. Good morning from the kitchen, folks. It's my spring Rauchbier bottling day. Let's have a look at it. Well, it's pretty awful outside with storm barrow, but inside It's looking quite nice indeed. In fact, this has cleared itself nice and naturally. No need for finings. I've just let it sit here and it's done absolutely perfectly. So I've got my bottles here, sanitised and ready to go. So let's crack on. So I've got my bottles in the sink and they're ready to be primed with a teaspoonful of caster sugar in each one. So the sugar, which I refer to as priming sugar, will be eaten by the yeast, which is still in suspension in the beer. When the yeast eats the sugar, it causes a fractional fermentation, very tiny amount. The byproduct of that is carbon dioxide, and CO2 is what will give the end product a sparkle. So you can hear Storm Barrow hitting the kitchen window. Anyway, let's get that bung out. I'm going to get my siphoning tube in. I'm holding it in place with this clip to keep it steady, and I'm going to push the tube down until it's just above the sediment line, just there. So the bottom of the tube is literally here. The sediment begins a couple of mils below it. It will draw some sediment up, but that doesn't matter because the first bit that comes out will end up in the hydrometer tube. Let's do it. Nice smell straight away. And into the bottles. So the tube's full, I'm now into the bottles, and it is literally a case of not making a mess, not knocking the bottles over. It is what it is. And there we go, bubbles in the siphoning tube indicate that this demijohn is empty. Okay, I've got to do exactly the same again now for demijohn number 2. You don't need to see that repeated, so I'll catch you in a minute. Okay, lots of bottles, but let's find out what the final gravity for this brew is. And that has sank very, very nicely. This is a good finish for a beer. The final gravity, I would say looking at the scale, is 1.013, 1013. Okay, I need to work out the final alcohol by volume for this brew. So I take the original gravity of 1.072. I deduct from that the final gravity of 1.013, and that equals 0.059. And I'll multiply this by 131.25, and that equals a final alcohol by volume of 7.74%. Wow, that is excellent. Ka-ching. Anyway, before I go any further, I just thought I'd have a cheeky difter. Wow, that is absolutely delicious. It's got Rauchbier written all over it. Fantastic. It's slightly drier than expected, but it had a low final gravity, so the sugar that remains in there is quite low. When this is conditioned and lagered, I've got really high hopes for this one. This could be my best brew yet. Okay, I'm bottling today with my Kegland crown capper. Not my favourite job. Those of you that watch my films will know that. So the crown capper holds the cap there in the middle. I've got my bottle lower down in the sink, so I'm pushing downwards. There's less chance of slippage. And I've also got the bottle on a non-slip silicone mat. Again, less chance of slippage. So here goes. Sometimes it works a charm, and sometimes it's a pain in the backside. Depends on the bottle. And this one's going to work a charm. A Newcastle brown bottle. Not ideal always because it's a clear glass one, but it isn't going to be in sunlight, so it'll be fine. And that is what you call a capped bottle. I've got a few more to do. It's not that exciting, so I'll catch you in a bit. Okay, bottles capped and flipped. So now it's time to rinse them off. You get all the horrible stickiness from the outside of them. It wasn't too bad a job capping, to be quite honest. My only conundrum is with the Erdinger bottles. They're my favourite bottles for delabelling because they're so easy to do. But they're very inconsistent with the Kegline Crown Capper. They slip so much. Your old traditional, like Nuki Brown type bottles, fantastic. But yeah, the Erdinger bottles, I had a little bit of an issue with now and again. I might need to look elsewhere. Okay, there's all my bottles, nice and dry. However, I've now got to wet them again because I've decided, as an extra layer of protection, I'm going to put a plastic shrink wrap on them. And I'm doing this because they are going out in the garden shed and there could be all sorts living in there. And you don't know what's going to be dropping its bits and bobs on these bottles. So just for hygiene reasons, I'm going to add an extra bit of protection via these plastic shrink wraps. Now, this one fits nicely on this bottle. Most of them are going to need trimming because they don't sink onto the bottle. So I'm just going to take my shrink wrap and I'm going to cut it down to about there. Now it's that big. And now when I put it on the bottle, it sits on nicely. I've got a few more to do. I'll be back. Okay, so there's all the bottles. I've also got the flip top bottles, but there's not an awful lot I can do with them. So I take my boiling water, and now I simply pour it over these. The boiling water causes the plastic to shrink, and it seals tightly to the bottles. It's just like you get on wine bottles. It'll offer an extra layer of protection because I know that there are definitely mice in my sheds and there could even be rats. I hope not. I don't think there are, but it, you know. But it's better to be safe than sorry, isn't it? And just in case you're wondering why I'm being so cautious, Google Weil's disease, W-E-I-L-S, not pleasant. Okay, I've got my labels printed out on a very simple Microsoft Word template. It's now a case of adding them to the bottles. So I just like to make the bottles look nice. I take pride on what's on the inside, so why not take pride on the outside? And there they all are. Right, now I need to load these up into my Feldschlossen crate, where they're going to go upstairs for conditioning. So they're going to go upstairs for a couple of weeks before going outside for lagering. And there they are. Okay, so this is where the beers will condition now for the next couple of weeks. So I'm in a warmish room, and when the temperature does drop, this thermometer alerts this plug, and when the temperature gets to 19.5 or below 19.5, it's currently dead on 19.5 actually. When it gets below 19.5, the plug turns on, and that turns the heater on just there. That comes on and it stays on until it gets to 20.5, and then it turns off, and that just keeps coming on and off throughout the day and night. 24/7, keeping this at a good temperature for conditioning. So the next film you see from me will be in a couple of weeks' time when it comes to taking this outside to begin the lagering process. Catch you then, folks. So welcome to the garden shed, and like every garden shed, it's a mess. This is where my beer is now going to stay for 3 months. It's actually New Year's Day today. It's the warmest New Year's on record, so not ideal temperature for lagering, but it's going to stay there until March at least. So it's for 1st of January, 1st of Feb, 1st of March, probably actually about April time. Easter time is when I'm going to open this. So I'll see you in about 3 months' time with an opening and tasting video, hopefully. Catch you then, folks. Good evening from the kitchen, folks. It's my spring Rauchbier opening night. Well, I did have visions of opening this in the garden, bathed in Easter sunshine, but unfortunately there ain't no Easter sunshine. It's been like this all day long. So yeah, so I'm opening in the kitchen. This has been in the bottle for 18 weeks. It's been lagering in the shed for 18 weeks. I'm hoping what I've got is an absolutely beautiful golden colour. I don't know. I want it to be clear. I want it to pour nicely. I want it to look good, smell good, but obviously taste good. And if it had a head, even better. There's a lot to ask for, isn't there? Let's find out. So, if you remember, I put the protective skin on the top of it before after capping it. So I'm just taking that off first of all. So I've cut through that. Here's the opener. Am I going to get a... Oh, I've got a small one, but I've got vapour. That is a good sign. Okay, let's pour this and see what it looks like. Oh, that looks like gold. Liquid gold. Not the illegal kind. That looks amazing. I am really, really pleased with that. Oh, it does smell gorgeous. It smells like a Rauchbier. What do you reckon? I'm pretty happy with that, to be quite honest with you. Right. It's quite gassy. It's got a beautiful, sweet Rauchbier flavour with very much a lager quality to it. I think I've hit the nail on the head. I'm not trying to, you know, float my own boat here or blow my own trumpet, but I think I've done a pretty good job. To say it's my first one that I've done this way. It's beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Honestly, I wish I could give you a sample of it right now. Here, have a go. One day the technology will be there, you know. Anyway, I'm really, really happy with this, as you can tell. So I hope you've enjoyed the film. It's been a mission, but it's been worth it. The best things come to those that wait. Cheers, folks. And I'll catch you on the next brew. The film that you've just watched is a Moss Home and Garden production. You can find more by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. I'd just like to say thank you very much for supporting my YouTube channel and for watching my films. It really is very much appreciated. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel in order to receive future updates about the home and garden films which I upload. You can find my YouTube channel by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. Please click on the red subscribe button. When you've done that, a little bell will appear. If you press that also, then you'll get future updates about the films which I upload. If you like my films, if you like my style of filming, then you might also like my travel channel, which you will find by going to youtube.com/Stuart Moss or type in www.mosstravel.tv. Again, if you could subscribe to that channel, it would be hugely appreciated. If you'd like to get Moss Home and Garden updates on Facebook, then please open Facebook and do a search for Moss Home and Garden, and you will find the page. If you like the page, then you will get future updates on there. And if you'd like to connect on Instagram for home, garden and travel photography, as well as some stories, then my username is StuMoss, STUMOSS. If you'd like to connect on Twitter, then my username is @StuartMoss. And if you'd like to contact me about film usage or any other issue, please just email me on stewmosshomegarden@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for supporting my channel, for watching my films. I do appreciate it. I'd just like you all to have a great day.